In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, by Gabor Mat, MD. Introduction. Imagine walking through a neighborhood unlike any you've probably seen. Not one filled with tidy lawns and playing children, but one where human suffering is laid bare on the sidewalks. Picture men and women, young and old, caught in a desperate dance, their bodies thin, their eyes haunted, seeking something. Anything. To quiet the storm inside. This isn't some distant, war-torn land. This is the downtown Eastside of Vancouver, Canada, a place Dr. Gabor Mat, a physician with decades of experience, calls home in his medical practice. For years, Dr. Mat worked directly with people society often labels simply as junkies. Individuals wrestling with severe addictions to heroin, cocaine, crystal meth, and more. But through countless encounters, listening to stories almost too painful to bear, he came to see something profound. He saw that addiction wasn't about bad choices or moral weakness. It wasn't even primarily about the drugs themselves. Addiction, he realized, is a desperate attempt to escape unbearable pain. It's a language spoken by those whose early lives were often filled with trauma, neglect, and a profound lack of love. His book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, became a national bestseller in Canada, translated into numerous languages, not just because it tells the raw, unflinching stories of his patients, but because it weaves together cutting-edge brain science, deep psychological insight, and profound human compassion. Dr. Mat, himself a child survivor of the Holocaust and someone who openly discusses his own struggles with compulsive behaviors, brings a unique empathy to this exploration. He argues that the roots of addiction lie deep within our earliest experiences, shaping the very neurobiology of our brains in ways we're only beginning to understand. So, what if I told you that by the end of our time together today, you'll understand addiction in a completely new way? Not as a failure of willpower, but as a complex interplay between personal history, brain chemistry, and the environment we live in. You'll see that the struggles of the street-level addict might echo, in surprising ways, the compulsions many of us wrestle with in our own lives, whether it's with food, shopping, work, or technology. Prepare yourself, because this journey into the realm of hungry ghosts might just change how you see the world, and perhaps, how you see yourself. Book summary. Let's start with that evocative title, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. Where does it come from? Dr. Mat draws inspiration from the Buddhist Wheel of Life, which depicts 6 realms representing different aspects of human existence. One of these is the hungry ghost realm. Imagine creatures with tiny mouths, scrawny necks, but huge, bloated, empty bellies. They are forever craving, forever seeking something outside themselves to fill an insatiable void, a deep ache that never goes away. But the tragedy is, what they seek, whether it's a drug, a drink, a frantic shopping spree, or endless hours online, can never truly satisfy them, because it's not what they truly need. They haunt their own lives, never fully present, driven by an emptiness they can't name. This, Dr. Mat suggests, is the domain of addiction. It's not just about illicit drugs, it's a fundamental human process. He believes there's one core addiction process, whether it shows up in the life-threatening dependencies of his patients in the downtown Eastside, or in the compulsive overeater, the shopaholic, the gambler, the sex addict, or even the socially admired workaholic. He argues that those we dismiss as junkies aren't fundamentally different from the rest of us. They are simply people mired at the extreme end of a continuum where many of us might find ourselves at different points. He even includes himself, acknowledging his own compulsive shopping for classical music CDs, spending thousands of dollars, hiding purchases, feeling the same cycles of craving, temporary relief, and shame that his patients describe with drugs. So, the crucial question isn't why the addiction, but rather, why the pain? Addiction, Dr. Mat insists again and again, always originates in pain, whether it's consciously felt or buried deep in the unconscious. It acts as an emotional anesthetic. The drugs, particularly heroin and cocaine, are powerful physical painkillers, but they also numb psychological distress. Think about it. Research shows that the very same brain centers that register physical pain also light up when we experience emotional rejection or social ostracism. When someone says they feel hurt emotionally, they're being scientifically precise. And the lives of those caught in severe addiction are almost invariably marked by an overwhelming amount of pain, especially early in life. Dr. Mat shares heartbreaking stories from his patients, tales of horrific abuse, physical, sexual, emotional, neglect, abandonment, humiliation, witnessing violence, having to care for addicted or unstable parents while still children themselves. One man recalls his mother sticking him in a clothes dryer as a toddler to keep him safe while she went out drinking. Serena, a young Indigenous woman, came to Vancouver searching for the mother who abandoned her at birth, only to have that mother introduce her to heroin and then sell her sexually while she slept. These aren't isolated incidents, they are tragically common among the severely addicted population. This early trauma isn't just a sad backstory, it fundamentally shapes the developing brain. Dr. Mat dives deep into the neuroscience, explaining that our brains, especially in the first few years of life, are incredibly malleable, sculpted by our experiences. He calls this experience-dependent brain development. Think of it like this. Unlike a horse that can run shortly after birth, a human baby is born with a very immature brain. About 3/4 of our brain growth happens outside the womb, mostly in the early years. This makes us incredibly adaptable, but also incredibly vulnerable to our environment. What does a developing brain need? 3 essential things: nutrition, physical security, and consistent emotional nurturing. In our society, it's often the emotional nurturing that gets disrupted, especially when parents are stressed, depressed, distracted, or dealing with their own unresolved trauma. This emotional connection, what psychiatrists call attachment, isn't just a nice-to-have. It's crucial for wiring the brain circuits responsible for managing stress, regulating emotions, feeling reward, and making healthy choices. Dr. Daniel Siegel's phrase captures it perfectly. Human connections create neuronal connections. When that secure attachment is missing, or worse, when the environment is frightening or chaotic, the brain adapts for survival, but not for optimal development. Key brain systems get thrown off balance. The opioid system. This involves our brain's natural painkillers, the endorphins. They're crucial for feeling love, connection, pleasure, and soothing pain, both physical and emotional. Think of the warm, soft hug a patient described feeling from her first hit of heroin. That's the feeling this system provides. Early stress or lack of nurturing touch can impair the development of this system, leaving a person less able to soothe themselves or feel connection, making external opioids incredibly appealing. The dopamine system. This is the brain's incentive and motivation system. Dopamine makes us want things, seek things out, feel energized and alive. It's triggered by things necessary for survival, like food and sex, but also by cues associated with reward, like seeing a candy bar you enjoyed before. Addictive drugs cause massive surges of dopamine, far beyond natural rewards. Chronic drug use actually reduces the number of dopamine receptors in the brain, making normal life feel dull and creating an even stronger craving for the drug just to feel okay. Critically, research suggests that early stress can also lead to fewer dopamine receptors before drug use even begins, creating a biological vulnerability. The prefrontal cortex, especially the orbitofrontal cortex or OFC, this is the brain's CEO, responsible for impulse control, decision-making, weighing long-term consequences, understanding social cues, and regulating emotions. This area develops significantly after birth and is highly dependent on attuned parenting. Trauma and chronic stress impair its development and function. In addicts, the OFC often shows reduced activity, leading to poor impulse control and difficulty choosing long-term well-being over short-term relief. It also becomes hypersensitive to drug cues, driving cravings. This is the biological basis for what Mat's patient Don insightfully called feeling like a child not released. Stress is a central theme throughout. Early life stress physiologically primes the brain to be more reactive to stress throughout life. This heightened stress response makes the soothing effects of drugs even more appealing. Furthermore, stress itself is a major trigger for craving and relapse. Uncertainty, lack of control, conflict, and isolation are potent stressors. And ironically, these are the very conditions often imposed on addicts by society and the war on drugs. This understanding challenges the idea that drugs cause addiction. Dr. Mat points to studies like the Vietnam War veterans. Many used heroin heavily while deployed in a stressful, traumatic environment, but 95% stopped upon returning home. The drug was the same, but the environment and the internal state changed. He also highlights Dr. Bruce Alexander's rat park experiments, Rats in cramped, isolated cages would compulsively self-administer morphine, but rats living in a spacious, stimulating, social environment rat park largely ignored the drug, even when physically dependent. The conclusion? It's not the drug, but the cage, the environment, and the internal state of distress and disconnection that creates the vulnerability. Addiction arises when a susceptible person, often due to early adversity, encounters a potentially addictive substance or behavior in a stressful context. Dr. Mat also pushes back against purely genetic explanations for addiction. While acknowledging genetic predispositions might play a role, like influencing temperament or sensitivity, he argues that the overwhelming emphasis on genes ignores the profound impact of the environment, especially early environment, on how genes are expressed. Epigenetics. He critiques the methodologies of many twin and adoption studies, pointing out they often fail to account for the shared prenatal environment and the significant stress involved in adoption itself. Believing addiction is all in the genes, he suggests, conveniently absolves society of looking at the difficult environmental factors, poverty, inequality, lack of support for parents, historical trauma, especially for indigenous populations, that contribute to the problem. This leads to his critique of the war on drugs. He sees it as a catastrophic failure based on a fundamental misunderstanding of addiction. It punishes people for coping mechanisms developed in response to suffering. It criminalizes vulnerable individuals, fills prisons disproportionately with minorities, fuels a violent black market that profits immensely from illegality, creates more stress and trauma for users, hindering recovery, and diverts massive resources from addressing the root causes and providing effective help. It treats a health issue rooted in pain as a moral or criminal failing. Instead, Dr. Mat advocates for a compassionate, science-based approach centered on harm reduction. Harm reduction accepts that abstinence isn't always immediately possible for severely addicted individuals and focuses on minimizing the negative consequences of drug use for both the user and society. This includes practices like needle exchanges, to prevent the spread of HIV and hepatitis C, methadone maintenance, a legal oral opioid that prevents withdrawal and reduces cravings for heroin, allowing people to stabilize their lives, supervised injection sites like Vancouver's Eastside, places where users can inject pre-obtained drugs in a clean environment with medical supervision, preventing overdose deaths, reducing public injecting, and connecting users to health services. Studies have shown these sites save lives and money, and do not increase crime or drug use. Potentially even prescribed heroin. For the small percentage of users for whom methadone doesn't work, studies in Switzerland and the UK have shown that providing pharmaceutical-grade heroin under medical supervision drastically reduces crime, improves health, and aids social reintegration. Harm reduction, Mat argues, isn't about condoning drug use. It's about meeting people where they are with compassion, reducing suffering, saving lives, and building trust, which is often the first step towards recovery. It's about recognizing the humanity of the addict. But harm reduction is only part of the picture. True healing requires addressing the underlying pain and the dysfunctional brain patterns. Dr. Mat emphasizes the importance of moving beyond mere abstinence, just stopping the behavior, to genuine sobriety, a state of conscious awareness and living with intention. This involves cultivating what he calls compassionate curiosity towards oneself. Instead of harsh self-judgment, why did I relapse again? I'm so weak. Asking gently, I wonder what pain or stress led me back to that old coping mechanism. Understanding the function the addiction served, as a painkiller, a stress reliever, a substitute for connection, is key to letting it go. He draws on mindfulness practices, similar to Buddhist traditions, emphasizing bare attention, observing thoughts, feelings, and cravings without automatically identifying with them or acting on them. This creates a space, a moment of choice, between impulse and action. He adapts Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz's 4 steps method originally developed for OCD. 1. Relabel. Recognize the addictive urge not as a real need, but as a deceptive message from faulty brain circuits. This isn't me. It's the addiction/my brain. On 2. Reattribute. Understand that the urge stems from those brain changes caused by past experiences and drug use, not from personal failure. 3. Refocus. Deliberately shift attention to a different, healthy, or constructive behavior, even for just 15 minutes, to break the automatic link between urge and action. 4. Revalue or devalue. Clearly remind yourself of the negative consequences of the addiction and the true value of sobriety and a life aligned with your deeper principles. To these, Mate adds a fifth step: recreate, actively envision and choose the life you want, aligned with your values, passions, and desire for connection, rather than being dictated by past programming. Healing also involves addressing the external environment. This means reducing stress, learning to assert one's needs healthfully, and finding supportive communities like 12-step groups for many where one feels belonging and purpose. For the loved ones of addicts, it means understanding that they cannot fix the addict, but can offer support without judgment, set healthy boundaries for themselves, and perhaps do their own work to understand the family dynamics involved. Ultimately, Dr. Mate frames addiction and recovery in spiritual terms, though not necessarily religious ones. The poverty Jesus spoke of, he suggests, is the loss of connection to our essential selves, to our divine nature, to our oneness with life. Addiction is a misguided quest to fill that spiritual void with external things that can never truly satisfy. Healing, then, is a journey back to oneself, a reclaiming of our full humanity. It's about finding meaning beyond the ego's grasp, often through service, creativity, or connection to something larger than oneself. It's acknowledging the pain without being defined by it, and discovering, as the poet Edmund Spenser wrote, that there is nothing lost but may be found, if sought. The book ends not with easy answers, but with a profound sense of the resilience of the human spirit, even amidst unimaginable suffering. It leaves us with a challenge: to look upon those struggling with addiction not with judgment or fear, but with compassion, recognizing the shared humanity and the deep pain that often lies beneath the surface. Commentary. Reading In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts is a deeply moving experience. It challenges so many of our ingrained assumptions about addiction, choice, and responsibility. Dr. Gabor Mat doesn't just present scientific findings. He invites us into the raw, painful, and surprisingly human world of his patients, forcing us to confront the suffering that fuels addiction. His central message? That addiction is not a matter of choice or moral failing but a response to deep pain, often rooted in childhood trauma and disrupted brain development, is profoundly important. It shifts the focus from blaming the individual to understanding the complex web of biological, psychological, and social factors involved. What struck me most powerfully is the universality of the addiction process he describes. By sharing his own struggles with compulsive shopping and workaholism, he breaks down the barrier between us and them. He makes us see that the hungry ghost, that sense of inner emptiness, that craving for something external to make us feel whole or soothe our discomfort, lives, to some degree, within many of us in our modern, stressed, and often disconnected society. Whether it's drugs, food, shopping, work, technology, or validation, we all seek ways to escape the present moment or fill a perceived void. The difference, often, is one of degree and consequence, shaped by the intensity of our early experiences and the resources available to us. This perspective doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does invite compassion. It urges us to ask why the pain. Before we rush to judgment, it highlights the spectacular failure and cruelty of the war on drugs, which punishes the most vulnerable victims of trauma and societal breakdown, while ignoring the root causes. His advocacy for harm reduction isn't about giving up. It's about meeting people where they are with pragmatic care, reducing immediate suffering, and creating the conditions of safety and trust where healing might become possible. So, how can we apply these profound lessons in our own lives, starting today? First, practice compassionate curiosity towards yourself. The next time you find yourself reaching for that extra cookie, scrolling endlessly online, or snapping irritably, pause for just a moment. Instead of judging yourself, gently ask, what feeling am I trying to soothe or escape right now? What deeper need might be unmet? Just noticing without judgment is a powerful first step. Second, try a moment of mindful awareness. Pick one small, habitual action you do today. Maybe checking your phone or reaching for a snack. Before you do it, just observe the impulse. Notice the feeling in your body, the thought in your mind. You don't have to stop yourself. Just become aware of the automatic process for a few seconds. This builds the muscle of conscious choice. Third, challenge judgmental thinking about others. When you encounter someone struggling, whether with addiction or any other difficulty, Try to look beyond the behavior and consider the potential pain or history that might be driving it. This doesn't mean condoning harm, but it shifts our internal stance from condemnation to potential understanding. In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts is more than a book about addiction. It's a book about what it means to be human, to suffer, and to heal. It reminds us that connection, compassion, and self-awareness are not just fuzzy ideals, but essential ingredients for individual and societal well-being. It offers a vision where understanding replaces blame, and where healing begins with acknowledging the pain, both in others and in ourselves. That was a summary of In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Mat, MD. We've explored some deep territory today. The roots of pain, the science of the brain, and the surprising resilience of the human spirit. But honestly, scratching the surface like this only gives you a glimpse. The real power of this book lies in immersing yourself in the stories, grappling with the science, and letting Dr. Mat's compassionate wisdom really sink in. This summary is like a map showing you the terrain, but reading the book is like taking the journey yourself. If you felt a connection to any of the ideas we discussed, if you're curious to understand addiction, or even just human suffering, on a deeper level, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. It's the kind of book that doesn't just inform you. It stays with you and might genuinely shift how you see the people around you, and maybe even yourself. You can find a link to the book in the description below. And if this exploration added value to your day, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to Billionaire's Bookshelf. We delve into transformative books like this regularly, and by subscribing, you ensure you won't miss our next deep dive. Let's continue learning and growing together on this journey.